Friday to you. It is the Friday episode of the Better Together Facebook Live, and my name is Barb Roose. I am your host, and the Better Together Facebook Live is all about creating spaces for us to have the real conversations about where you come from and what you're going through. And here on Better Together, we want to find the hope, the help, as well as the practical next steps that we need, because we all want to get better together. And so hi to Robin out there, and hi Amy. We are going to talk today about a topic that we kind of whisper about to our friends, but we don't always have this open and honest dialogue, especially amongst Christians. So, I mean, I think things are getting better, but I think we have a long way to go. It's been forever and a day since the pandemic. I don't know about you guys, but there are times when I feel like we've been in the pandemic for next to forever. I saw this picture recently, and we've seen this meme, but I want you to look closely at the face on the left and then the face on the right. Does this not feel like our pandemic experience, friends? Seriously. I mean, we've been doing this for a while. And so as we now in many states are kind of living in between, some things are open, some things are still closed, some of us are still staying at home, some of us are still going to work all of the time. We're going to talk about some of the mental health impact that we've all felt and experienced because of the pandemic. For some of us, the mental health struggles have been so very real. And when we are struggling with mental health, it's hard to keep a healthy perspective. It's hard to make good decisions. It's hard to engage in great relationships. And for some of you, these mental health struggles, they were happening long before the pandemic. And so today, I'm going to talk with a good friend of mine. Our topic for today is finding hope in the midst of depression. And so I want to read the introduction. And as you are listening, I'm hoping today that you will come away with hope. And if this episode is helpful for you, I definitely want you to share it with your friends. And so my guest today on Better Together is Melissa Maimone. Melissa is the author of The Radiant Midnight, Depression, Grace, and the Gifts of a Dark Place. She's also the author of Gathering Dandelions, Meditations and Musings on Faith, Fracture, and Beauty Mistaken for a Weed. Now, Melissa's been a longtime friend of mine, and she's also been an incredible influencer. She's been a featured speaker at many Christian women's events throughout the country. Her writings appeared on Proverbs 31, Lifeway, as well as media outlets. She has been a guest on our friend Kathy Lipp's Clutter-Free Academy webcast, which is a fantastic show, as well as TBN and KKLA Christian Radio. Melissa also speaks for Compassion International, and you're going to find out later why she's got an incredible heart. She's also got a ministry background, which is kind of how we met many years ago. Melissa and her husband, Danny, live outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, and they just got there. There's a great story about that. They're the parents to Cole, who lives in North Carolina, and Elizabeth, who lives at home. Their daughter, Elizabeth, has had developmental delays, and the experience of raising a child with special needs has been challenging and rewarding, but they wouldn't change a thing. Melissa loves Jesus, her family, and her friends, and her hobbies include reading, walking, watching weird documentaries, and searching out the perfect street taco. So friends, I'm excited for you to get a chance to meet my friend Melissa. Hello. How are you?
Hi, Barb. I'm doing really well. How are you doing?
I am doing great. I'm so glad that you came over to say hello on the Better Together podcast.
I am honored to be here.
Well, and you're saying hi from Raleigh, North Carolina, which is a new spot for you.
Yeah, we drove out here at the end of February. We stayed with friends for a couple of weeks until our house closed, and we moved into our house about a week before everything shut down. And when we left California, we decided, you know what? we're going to get rid of like everything and we're going to start over. And so we moved in with a card table and chairs, and we didn't have any furniture. So it was interesting because it was like everything just sort of shut down as soon as we got here. Yeah, it was, I've learned how to shop on the internet a lot.
I imagine you did. And I was going to think the last time you and I talked, we had a long phone conversation, but it might have been in the it might have been in the summertime. And I mean, we had a long phone chat. And so the move came up, and so I was looking forward to today to kind of catch up with you on that. What did it feel like, first of all, like moving all the way across the country and then the pandemic hitting?
I had and when I say this, I'm not joking. Like I had a couple of panic attacks on the way out because we prayed about it a lot, and God opened doors in such a way that, praise the Lord, I mean, he made it really clear that this was his plan for us. And we were excited about that because we had asked him if that was his plan, if he would open that door, and he did. You're literally driving into the unknown, and the known, no matter what, is always more comforting than the unknown, simply because you just have to trust. And so, it was a little scary moving out because we had a really good life in California and we have very dear friends and my family's out there. So it was scary. But knowing that God has us is the deepest comfort that you can have. And it has allowed me to just feel the feels as I go and know that God's got me no matter what. And I think it's part of my whole ministry is just teaching people, like, you can have really messy feelings of fear and of nervousness and of panic, and you can still be faithful. And I've felt both those things, both the fear and the faith along the way.
Love that. And so, friends, if you're just joining us right now, welcome to the Better Together Facebook Live with Barb Roose. And I am here with my friend and special guest, Melissa Maimone. And today we're talking about finding hope when you're struggling with depression. And so Melissa and I are going to talk about her story and some practical tools, friends, that you can use today. A number of you have posted in the comments, "Hi, Lynn, it's good to see you." Friends, go ahead and drop if you've got any questions or if you just want to say hi. One of the things that I would love to hear from folks, especially if you're struggling with anxiety and depression, is tell us, what do you wish that your friends and your family knew about your anxiety and depression? Go ahead and share your comments with us, and we'll talk through some of those comments later.
Really good.
Melissa, for you talked about moving across country and kind of having a panic attack, and then being in the pandemic in a house, moving across the country without a social network.
No.
What have been some of the lessons for you that you've been learning during the pandemic? Maybe one or two lessons that you're like, oh, that was kind of an aha moment for me.
I tend to be a person who enjoys solitude. I think we live in a culture that doesn't appreciate silence and solitude enough. So I tend to be that person by nature. And I think one of the things that the pandemic has taught me is that I deeply need people. I need them. I need to do this where you and I see each other. And I need to actually be physically with people as well. And I've known that, but I could physically feel the need like no other time, I think, for myself, because that's always the thing that I tend to dismiss a little bit, how much we deeply need others. So yeah, that's probably been a big one for me.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, again, friends, if you're joining me, I am on with my friend, Melissa Maimone. She is the author of the book, The Radiant Midnight. And the subtitle is Depression, Grace, and the Gifts of a Dark Place. And Melissa's been my friend for many years. This book for me came out at a very dark time in my life that was really difficult. And in fact, I had the honor of endorsing the book. And so about The Radiant Midnight, I wrote, if you are suffering, this book is a safe space. Melissa isn't here to fix you or your feelings. Rather, she masterfully weaves scripture, personal stories, and profound insights to offer you eternal hope that is both raw and real. As one who currently sits in long, dark days of a midnight season, the radiant midnight stirred my resolve to sit and learn and listen to God's lessons rather than to speed through my pain. And
Wow.
so this
That
is
was good, Barb. Wow.
honey, I
Thank
felt
you.
every single one
Wow.
of those words. And so, Joy, thank you for joining us. Hi, Diane. I'm so glad you're here. Brittany, thank you for joining us. And so, Melissa, for you, as we're talking about finding hope in the midst of the depression, the pandemic has created mental health challenges for all of us. But there are a group of folks out there who were dealing with depression before the pandemic, and then it just got woo. So tell our listeners today just a little bit about your life and how you step into this whole arena of anxiety and depression.
Well, I started experiencing depression and anxiety probably around the time I was about 13. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I was hospitalized in a psychiatric unit because they were in fear that I was going to take my life. And things, got better after that because I started to get some help and get some tools as to how to live my life. But in my early 20s, I came to Christ. So I was raised going to church on Sunday, but I didn't really develop that personal, life-changing relationship with Jesus Christ until I was in my 20s. And I sort of thought that I wouldn't struggle with depression anymore after that. And I didn't struggle with it for probably the first 2 or 3 years I had come to Christ. And I thought it was gone. And then it came back. And it has come and gone throughout my life, and it has never gone away permanently. And so I think at some point, I realized that if I have prayed and asked God to take it away over and over, and he hasn't, then if we have a purposeful God, if we have a gracious God, if we have a God who has numbered the hairs on our head, then perhaps he has left it there for a reason. And so I stopped asking him to take it away, and I started asking him to let me see his goodness in the midst of it. And that's been a journey for probably the last 10 years that has been a privilege to be on. It has really taught me a lot about the goodness of God and about his grace. I think we like to talk about God's grace, but the only time that grace really works is when we are desperate for it and we really need it and when we don't deserve it. And that feels icky to feel those things. And yet that's where we need his grace the most. So learning to live in that space of appreciating and knowing I need his grace, and also knowing that we have a God of hope and healing as well.
Well, we're going to talk about some practical ways to lean into this, but I my heart, like there's a way that you describe this difficult journey of living with depression and accepting it. It is so delicately beautiful, especially just the idea that grace only works when we're desperate for it. Because there are some of us, especially in the church, unfortunately, who lead people to believe that they're not praying hard enough. That there's something wrong with them, that God hasn't taken it away. And so one of the things that I love, a quote that you have is, I am learning that I can bring my whole messy self before God. And when I invite him in, he simply steps over all of that clutter to sweep me up in his arms of grace. When you think about your journey with depression and anxiety on the most difficult days, tell us about how you navigate those, especially during the pandemic.
I think for a long time, well, yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, I thought that I needed to get rid of it, which meant that as soon as I started feeling depressed, I'd feel even worse because I couldn't. And then I felt like I hid myself from God. And that's really when I needed him the most. And I think with the pandemic, my own words come back to me because, I've written a book about this, but I've written a book about it like to ask people to come alongside me. I have not like solved the problem. And I haven't it's not a book like 7 Easy Steps to Never Feel Depressed Again. Like it's not, it's more like, what do we do in it? And I think one of the things that we do in it is that we count on the grace that we've received from him. And I hear the expression often, like, just give yourself grace. And I don't know, Barb, about you, but my own grace is very wishy-washy. Like I have grace sometimes and not others. And then sometimes I give myself I'll give myself grace and I'll just have like the 7th Twinkie or whatever. And like, I'm not sure that's that's the grace that we need. I know it's not the grace we need. I know I need the grace of God. And you have it. Like when you have placed your faith in Jesus Christ, you have his grace, and his grace is the grace that's sufficient. His grace is the grace that says to you, you don't need to produce this. Like it's here, it's arrived. And so, I've had to remind myself of that in this time because I have struggled with depression in this pandemic for sure. And I think often we think we need to rush through it. And I've myself wanted to rush through it. And I've had to speak those words back to myself to say, I can just stay here right now in his grace and not rush through it.
Well, and so I think this is a great segue to move into 3 of the strategies. And so if you're listening today, friends, I am on with my friend, Melissa Maimone. She is the author of The Radiant Midnight, and its subtitle is Depression, Grace, and the Gifts of a Dark Place. And so we want to talk about 3 tools or 3 approaches that you can use if you've been struggling with depression, whether it's something you've been struggling with for years or in the pandemic, you find yourself in the dark place. And coincidentally, Melissa, the first tool, the first strategy is grace. And so talk to us about that.
Well, in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about that he had this thorn in his side, and it was this thing that he kept asking God to get rid of. And he said that the Lord responded to him and said, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. And so if God is not afraid of our weakness, and God is not distracted of just wanting us to be fixed or wanting to just, hurry up and get over it, then I think we can rest in the grace to know you don't need to just get over this. Like you can actually stay present in it a little bit. And there's no shame in this. There is no shame in struggling with depression. And I love the Psalms because David, he lets us have it. Like he lets us see like his journal and to see how desperate he becomes. And so I think if David was so intimate with God and he confessed these things to God, then I think we have a safe place to go in him where we can confess our anguish and we can be loved in that well. So the first one I would say is grace for the first.
And what you were saying is so life-giving because we want to try to force ourselves out of it. And just when you have talked about over the years, this idea that God, it's not that he's excited that we're struggling. He's not in heaven saying, you've got depression and I'm fine with that.
Right.
That he does not feel like it is, your blessings in life you're not missing blessings from God because you're struggling with depression. He's not withholding something good from you. That depression isn't a sign that you have made God angry or that you it's none of those things. It is a fruit of living in a fallen world. And,
that is so well said. It is a fruit of living in a fallen world. It sure is. And, you see in scripture places where people are like, okay, so he's blind. So who did it? Like, why? And we try and equate what's happening in our life with what, a reason why. And it essentially, what we do when we do that is we essentially eliminate grace actually from the entire conversation, because if we got exactly what we deserve, then why did Jesus even need to come on the cross? Why did, like, what grace doesn't even make sense. So, as I was looking at some of the comments, and Joy said, some days my own anxiety and feelings is all that I can handle. And what I really respect about that, Joy, is there's an acceptance there to say it's enough. Like, it's enough to just trust that today it's all you can handle. And then I think, because if you start to learn to kind of accept it and learn to make a space for it in your life, you now have the power to be able to go and to do scary things, and to be able to go and push it a little bit, to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to try this even though I have anxiety. I'm going to do something even though I feel like I don't. And so I think, like, if we're going to have like the three, strategies, I would say the second is just to remember grip, that God has you. The Lord has you in his grip. And if we know that God has us in his grip, that means we can actually do stuff that's scary. And we can actually try things that's scary. And we do not need to wait to not feel depressed, not feel anxious, or to feel courageous in order to do hard things. And sometimes the hardest thing you can do in this pandemic is go to the grocery store. Like, going to the grocery store,
Right. Well, yeah. And that I think that has that grip. I love that, because we do have to work a lot harder these days mentally to do things that used to be simple for us.
Yes.
And I came across the term pandemic fatigue a couple of weeks ago, and it described the mental and physical weariness that we have of just constantly trying to manage uncertainty and change. And there's but that idea of grip, that even though there is so much uncertainty, that Joshua 1:9, God's like, do not be afraid, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or discouraged. I'm going to be with you wherever you go. That
What's hard? Present.
What's hard about remembering God's grip, though, when someone is in the dark days of depression? What's hard about that? People say, I can't feel God. I can't see God. It's scary for me.
And that's the key word, is feel. I don't feel him. And sometimes our feelings are so acute and so present that we do not experience God's presence, because fear is so present. It does not mean that God's not there. And, there are days, it is fascinating. Some days I'm like, I feel so fat. And other days I'm like, I feel great. The scale has not changed. There has been no difference in, the way my jeans fit, but there are days, and it's like, ostensibly nothing has changed. And I think we often project how we feel onto God. That if we feel like a disappointment, if we feel alone, we believe God has left us alone, or God is disappointed in us. And you have to remember that your feelings are, first of all, they're important to God. We can go to God with anything, any feeling, but remember that they are not a reflection of God. And it is very important to remember this, because we don't stand in a shifting sand faith. We stand on a rock, and your feelings will not damage how God feels about you, ever. And so I think the hardest part about depression and anxiety is that it's like I said, it's like a midnight. It just falls upon us, and we can't see 2 feet in front of us. And so we sort of stumble around, but God is with us there. He is with us there. It's just that we sometimes forget, and anxiety shouts louder than the still small voice of God. It does not change his presence, though.
Oh, that was so rich and so good. Thank you. We had a couple of folks drop in with comments. Sandra was talking, as we were talking about keeping our focus on God, to let our praises go up and God's blessings to come down on us. I wanted to post about God's grip. Lance, thank you for joining us. So Melissa, we've talked about grace and we've talked about grip. What is the third thing you want us to remember?
Well, I wanted to share with you real quick. I was at the grocery store. I was at Walmart with my husband a few weeks ago and my daughter, and you're supposed to go down, like there's the arrows in the grocery store now, like one way and all of that, which half the people do and half the people don't. And I'm always like, are they not doing it because they don't care? Or are they not doing it because they don't see it? And then I go down the wrong aisle and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm too close to this person, or, oh my gosh, that person's standing in front of my way and I need a can of chili, whatever it is. And the anxiety just rises up in me because I've told my husband, I feel like I can't win. I feel like I can't win. I can put my mask on and then they say, oh, but you have to change out your mask every day. I'm like, I don't have an endless supply of masks, or, you have to, make sure and wash your hands all the time. And then I'm like, wait, but I touched this thing and I don't have my sanitizer. Like, it's just, I feel like I can't win. And when we were at the store, I had a big panic attack and it was awful. And I had to go out to the car and I just was like, I need to go. And I sat in the car and I realized that big spaces for me don't feel great right now. And I hate that, but I've also realized, you know what? I can go to the grocery store, which feels better to me than going to Walmart right now. It just does. And so that I'm doing things that allow me to be grounded in him in a way that is actually going to keep some more anxiety at bay. And so for me, realizing my limitation is saying, I need to go to smaller stores right now, even if it costs a little bit more. And I think the third strategy is grounding. God's grace and his love is practical. It's not just ethereal. And I don't like it if I'm struggling with depression. And I've had plenty of people email me saying, like, you just need to give it up to God and all of these things. And I just think, I know who my Jesus is. I know who my God is. And he is good. And I have to remember, like, he is not going to fail me no matter what. And so I'm never a failure if I am experiencing these things. And at the same time, because I'm on a solid rock, like, I can go do stuff. I can feel the fear and it will not consume me. It will not. And I think the more I do, the more I realize that he's with me, because I get to see him.
Oh, that is so good. Oh my goodness gracious. That is so good. I asked the audience, did they have strategies that help them? And so Diane looks like she's thankful for your 3Gs. Kiana said for her, in the Philippines, it's 1:27 a.m. Good morning. So,
oh my gosh,
thank you for joining us from the Philippines. But Melissa, for the audience, I've been showing them the copy of The Radiant Midnight shamelessly and often. Where can folks, because you've captured much of what you've talked about today in your journey in the book, and so where can people find The Radiant Midnight at?
It's available on Amazon. You can go to theradiantmidnight.com, or you can just look for it on Amazon and it is there. It's also on my website, which is melissamamone.com. And I'm on Facebook, so you guys can always personal message me or anything. And I'm here. I love hearing people's stories of redemption, and I love being able to talk to people about these things, because sometimes the hardest part about depression and the hardest part about the COVID is loneliness. And we have an amazing network of people around us. And sometimes we forget, because the feeling of aloneness tells us that we are alone. And those are two very different things.
Absolutely. Well, friends, I am so glad that you have joined us today. Hi, Carol. Thank you for tuning in. This Facebook Live broadcast will be on my page, and you'll be able to go back and watch it. If you know someone who has been struggling with anxiety and depression, and they need help as well as practical tools, go ahead and tag them in the comments. because Melissa's words are life-giving and they will bring hope. I love the 3 G's today of grace and grip and grounding. And so as we are leaving, Melissa, there is a prayer that I want to read for the audience. And it was a prayer that you wrote. And this is just a precious, precious way of ending things. And then I'll ask you to just share a final word of encouragement. The prayer is, Dear Lord, help me trust your love for me, even when I cannot see a clear path out of my circumstances. When I find myself in the dark places of this life, show me the light of your presence. Amen. Any
Amen.
final words of encouragement you want to share?
I want to remind people that we have the God of hope, and that hope will not let you down. And you can always hope. And hope isn't just for the future. It's for right now. It's for today. It's in your present circumstances. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a person who lives with depression and anxiety. And yet I feel joy. And I know that I have a God who is with me in all of it. And in that way, I feel like I've hit the jackpot, because I get to experience my weakness in God's strength. And it has forever changed my life. So I'm grateful. And I'm grateful for you, Barb Roose, for talking about this stuff. It's so important. It's so important. We have got to talk about the things that are hard. And so thank you for doing that today.
Well, thank you for joining me today. And friends, if you're watching live or on the replay, thank you for joining me for today's Better Together Facebook Live. New episodes are on Tuesdays at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time and Fridays at 1 p.m. So glad that you joined us today. God bless and have a great weekend.
Okay.